When my son David slammed the papers down in front of me, his words cut through the quiet like a blade. "You're moving into a nursing home, Mom. It's already decided." I blinked, my fingers trembling as I reached for the papers, my heart refusing to accept what my ears had just heard. He wasn't asking me. He wasn't suggesting it. He was telling me, as if I were some burden he could just unload with a signature. The betrayal stung sharp and deep because it wasn't just his tone, it was the cold calculation in his eyes, the kind I had only ever seen in people who wanted something, not in the son I raised. "What are you talking about, David?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "This is my home. I've lived here for over 40 years. Why would you?" He didn't even let me finish. He leaned across the table, tapping the stack of forms with his pen like a gavel. "Because it's not practical anymore. You're 78, Mom. You can't keep up with this place. The taxes, the maintenance, the bills, it's all too much. This way you'll be taken care of, and we'll handle the rest." The "we" in his sentence chilled me. I knew he meant him and his wife, Rebecca. For months I had noticed how she eyed the house with a glimmer that wasn't admiration, it was hunger. The house wasn't just a place to her. It was an asset, a prize. I stared at my son, my boy whom I had sacrificed my youth for, whom I had raised alone after his father died in an accident when David was just 8 years old. I had worked double shifts at the diner, scraped together pennies to pay for his school trips, gone without new shoes so he could have cleats for baseball. And now here he was, throwing me away like an old couch no longer useful. The greedy motive was suddenly clear in every word he spoke. "The nursing home already has a spot open. We toured it last week. Nice place. Private room. Rebecca and I will sell this house, put the money to good use for the family. It's the smart thing to do. Sell this house." The words hammered against my chest. This wasn't about me needing care. This was about them wanting money. My home, where I had buried my husband's ashes under the oak tree, where I had patched the roof myself in the dead of winter, where every corner held a memory, wasn't a home to them. It was a check they hadn't cashed yet. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, her lips curved into the faintest smirk. "It's for the best, really," she said smoothly. "You'll be around people your own age. Activities, meals prepared for you, medical staff right there if something happens. And this house, it's far too much for you now. Don't you want peace of mind?" Peace of mind. I almost laughed. How could there be peace when your own flesh and blood treats you like a problem to be solved? I looked back at David, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger who saw dollar signs where his mother's heart should be. The shock of it twisted inside me, but along with the pain, something else sparked alive, a hard, cold determination I hadn't felt in years. He thought he had decided my future. He thought he could move me out, sell this house, and take everything I built. But what he didn't know was that I had secrets of my own. Secrets that would change everything. As my hands brushed the papers, I felt the familiar weight of my checkbook in the pocket of my cardigan. My late husband had left me with more than just this house. Over the years, I had tucked away savings, investments David knew nothing about. He thought this house was my only card to play. He was wrong. I looked at him and forced my lips to curve into a small, defeated smile. "If you think this is what's best," my voice cracked just enough to make him believe I was giving in. Inside, I was already plotting. Because if David thought he could throw me away like trash, then he was about to learn the cost of underestimating a mother. What he didn't know was that tomorrow morning, I had an appointment with a lawyer. What he didn't know was that I wasn't going to the nursing home. And what he didn't know most of all, was that I would make sure when this was all over, he wouldn't see a dime from me, not for my house, not for my savings, not for my will. But I stayed silent, letting him and Rebecca exchange smug glances. For now. Because sometimes the best revenge begins with silence. And as I signed my name on the line he had pointed to, not on the transfer of my house, but on the blank sheet of paper he had slid too quickly, assuming my trust, I thought of all the ways I could twist this betrayal back on him. He thought he had won. But he hadn't realized the game had just begun. The next morning, as I folded my husband's old Bible and slid it into my purse along with the checkbook, I whispered to myself, "This house won't be yours, David. Not now, not ever." And just as I reached for the phone to call the lawyer, it rang. On the other end was a voice I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Harris? You don't know me, But you need to hear this. Your son has plans for you far worse than a nursing home. My heart froze, the receiver slipping in my hand. David didn't even look back when he dropped me off at the nursing home. The car door slammed, his tires screeched against the pavement, and in that moment, I realized he hadn't brought me here for a tour like he promised. He had brought me here to stay. My suitcase, the one with faded stickers from trips I took with my late husband Henry, sat abandoned at my side like proof of his betrayal. I bent to pick it up, my hands trembling, and that's when the matron appeared, clipboard in hand, smile rehearsed. "Mrs. Anderson?" she asked gently. I wanted to scream that my name was Eleanor, not Mrs. Anderson, not some file to be ticked off a chart. But I nodded, because my throat felt raw and dry. "Yes," I whispered. "Your son has already filled out your intake forms," she said, flipping pages like it was all perfectly routine. "We'll get you settled." My son. My flesh and blood. He had signed papers as though I were luggage to be checked in. I followed her down the long, antiseptic-smelling hallway. The air reeked of bleach and stale soup. The walls were pale beige, the same kind of color Henry once called soulless. Every door had a number instead of a name. It didn't feel like a place where people lived, it felt like storage. Storage for the forgotten. They placed me in a small room with 2 beds. The one by the window was occupied by a woman who looked to be in her late 80s. Her hair was thin and wispy, her skin stretched tight over her cheekbones, but her eyes, oh, her eyes were sharp. She looked at me without saying a word, then returned to staring out the window at the parking lot. "This will be your bed," the matron said, gesturing toward the side nearest the bathroom. "Meals are at 8, noon, and 6. Lights out at 9. It was spoken like a prison sentence. My chest constricted. I lowered myself onto the hard mattress and for a moment, I thought I might not be able to breathe. That night, when the lights clicked off and the hallway filled with the squeak of nurses' shoes, I cried silently into my pillow. I thought of Henry. I thought of the life we had built in our home. I thought of the garden I tended, the photos on the mantel, the smell of fresh bread in the kitchen. All of it, gone. And for what? Because David wanted money. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my roommate coughing violently. I sat up quickly. "Are you all right?" I asked, reaching for a glass of water on her nightstand. She took it, sipped, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Name's Mabel," she croaked. "You're new." "Yes," I said softly. "Yesterday." She chuckled bitterly. "They always look the same, the ones who come in the first day, eyes red from crying, hands shaking. Don't worry, you'll get used to it." "I don't want to get used to it," I said firmly, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Mabel turned to look at me. Her sharp eyes softened. "Then maybe you won't," she said. "But most of us do." At breakfast, I sat among strangers who all seemed resigned. Some stared blankly at their trays. Others muttered to themselves. A man at the end of the table kept tapping a spoon against his plate, rhythmically, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. I forced myself to eat the watery oatmeal, though it tasted nothing like the warm bowls Henry used to make me when I was sick. David didn't call. Not that day. Not the next. Not even the week after. But Rebecca did. She left a message with the front desk, just checking in to see if Eleanor has adjusted. "Tell her we've been looking into realtors for the house. The market is hot. We'll make sure it's taken care of." Taken care of. As if my home was a burden, not the heart of my entire existence. That night, I asked Mabel how long she'd been there. 2 years, she said with a sigh. My son dropped me off after my husband passed. Said it was for my own good. That was the last time I saw him. Her words pierced me. Was that what David intended? To erase me from his life entirely once he had what he wanted? The thought made my stomach churn. But it also lit a fire in me. I wasn't going to be erased. One afternoon, while Mabel dozed in her chair, I slipped into the common lounge. There was a landline phone there, tucked near a stack of outdated magazines. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, Arthur Sterling, Henry's old friend and our family lawyer. "Eleanor," his warm voice answered after 2 rings. What a surprise. I nearly broke down at the sound of someone saying my name with care. "Arthur," I whispered, "I need your help." Within days, Arthur visited the nursing home. He brought a leather folder with documents and quietly slid them onto my lap when no one was looking. David is pushing to sell the house, I told him. But he doesn't know I've kept certain accounts separate. I want everything moved into a trust he can't touch. And I want the house sold, on my terms, not his. Arthur raised his eyebrows. You're sure about this? Yes, I said, steel running through my veins. If my son thinks he can throw me into a nursing home and cash out my life, he has another thing coming. That night, as I lay in the narrow bed, I thought about the plan forming in my mind. It was risky. It was bold. But I had one thing on my side, my son's arrogance. He believed I was beaten, broken, and helpless. That mistake would cost him dearly. Still, I couldn't ignore the ache in my chest. I remembered rocking David to sleep when he was a baby, holding his hand on his first day of school, cheering at his graduation. How had that little boy grown into the man who could abandon me here like trash? The tears came again, hot and bitter. But this time, I didn't let them last long. Because tomorrow, I would take my first step toward revenge. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold, but one thing was certain, David had underestimated me. And soon, he would regret it. I woke before dawn the next day with a small, fierce plan already humming in my head. The nursing home smelled the same, bleach and boiled cabbage, but inside that smell, for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange electricity. I was not defeated. I had lawyers, I had papers, and I had a stubbornness that could not be bought. I had to move carefully, impatience would hand them the win. So I began the careful work of turning hurt into a weapon. First, I made a list. I always made lists. The yellow legal pad Arthur had given me sat on the bedside table like a tiny altar of purpose. On one column I wrote names: Arthur Sterling the lawyer, Priya Ramos the forensic accountant Arthur recommended, Helen, my neighbor who had keys to our old garden shed and a memory like a steel trap, Mabel, my roommate with a thin voice and the sharp eyes. On the next column I wrote actions: medical evaluation paperwork, notarized trust documents, transfer freezes, bank watch alerts, realtor calls. Each line was a small practical thing I could do that would make their greedy plans stumble and fall. Arthur came twice that week, his suit a little rumpled from long hours at the office. He brought folders with detailed instructions and a calm confidence that made me feel less like a victim and more like a general preparing for battle. We'll set up an irrevocable trust, he said, sliding a sheet across the table with clauses and fine print. That will keep your assets out of their reach. Once it's properly executed and funded, they can't touch it without going through court, and that's expensive and slow. His fingers tapped the pen as if he were counting the ways our work would protect me. It won't stop them from trying, I said, because I knew my son. They'll claw and claw until whatever's left is in pieces. No one can claw faster than the law can act if we have everything in place first, Arthur replied. But we must act fast. So I signed what needed signing. The nursing home staff watched me with that blank little pitying smile people reserve for the elderly. They must have thought I was a frail old lady doting over signatures while the big kids played with my life. Let them think that. It made me invisible in ways I could use. While Arthur arranged the trust, Priya dug into the accounts. She sat at my kitchen table for 2 long afternoons, fingers flying over her laptop, the screen reflecting in her glasses. They've taken small amounts over time, she said, not looking up. It's a funnel, gently redirected withdrawals, odd checks written to odd names. Not enough to raise alarms quickly, but enough to drain you over months. Her voice was clinical, but there was a disgust in it that warmed me. To watch a professional name the theft gave me something like vindication. You can trace every dollar, I told her quietly. I had the dates, the bank statements shoved in a shoebox in the attic, old habits. I'd kept records like a miser, thinking no one would notice, thinking I'd need them for taxes or emergencies, never imagining I'd need them to salvage my dignity. Priya nodded. We'll build a paper trail. We'll get subpoenas if necessary. If they funneled money into shell accounts or used your checks for personal expenses, we'll find it. She printed out spreadsheets that looked, at first glance, like a foreign language. To me they read like confession. The pattern emerged: small payments to restaurants, a string of charges at a hardware store, a few withdrawals at an ATM near a hotel. It all pointed, like a crooked finger, to someone who had been testing the water long before the knife plunged. While the lawyers and accountants did their technical work, I did my own spy work. It felt ridiculous at first, an old woman on a mission, but it was necessary. I learned how to use the nursing home phone system to check messages, how to slide notes across nursing stations without attracting attention. I found a small digital recorder in a charity shop and tucked it into the lining of my cardigan like a contraband rosary. Mabel teased me about it once, "You and your gadgets, dear," but when I pressed play and heard Rebecca's voice, smooth as oil, telling someone she'd speed things along, Mabel's eyes grew wide and she stopped teasing. I began to visit the house in secret. Arthur had made arrangements. A trusted realtor would show me the property for evaluation as my legal representative, and Helen, who still had a key, would let me in by the back door. Walking through my rooms with the sunlight slanting across the hardwood made a strange ache rise and settle. The kitchen still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The mantel still held Henry's photograph, the one where his smile was crooked in the way I loved. But even as I stood there, the plan gnawed at me like a hungry thing. I could not let the house become their payday. At the bank I performed one of the most delicate maneuvers of my life. Priya and Arthur had recommended it, a quiet, coordinated movement to freeze certain accounts and move funds into the trust without alerting David and Rebecca. The bank manager, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes named Mrs. Klein, treated me with a surprising gravity. "We'll set up the watch," she said. "Any transfer over a certain amount and we call you directly. Any new payee added, we freeze it. We'll also put a notice on the system that requires 2 authorized signatures for any change." "They'll try to act fast," I told her. "I need a lock on anything they could use." "You'll have it," she assured me. She stamped forms and handed me a little receipt with a reference number. It felt bureaucratic and secure, like putting a padlock on a gate I had guarded for years. Back at the nursing home, I started planting seeds. Not lies, facts. I cornered the activities coordinator and asked casually if they ever had trouble with visitors bringing in paperwork or pushing families toward certain decisions. I made a fuss of telling a nurse how lovely the flowers were one of the volunteers had brought. The volunteer's name, I learned later, was connected to the realty agency David and Rebecca had been chatting with. I wrote down names, places, times, the little network that had been forming around my son and his wife. This was not petty revenge, it was intelligence gathering. And then, something unexpected happened. David came to visit. Not with Rebecca, not with smiles, just him, hair a little too neat, suit a little too stiff. He sat across from me in the activities room where I had been playing bridge with 2 women who now gave me looks like I had come back from the dead. He shifted in his chair like a boy caught stealing candy. "I wanted to talk," he said. His voice was low. He looked tired, but there was a hardness to him I hadn't seen before. "About what?" I asked. He hesitated, fingers worrying the edge of his sleeve. "About the house. About you. I thought this was best. The home is big, and we have expenses. I didn't want you to struggle." "You didn't want me to struggle," I repeated slowly. "Or you wanted to be comfortable." "You don't have to turn this into a power play, Mom," he said, as if I were the one making grand choices. Power play. That word stung. Who was playing with power? The son who'd brought me to a place with numbered doors, or the mother who'd worn holes into her patience waiting for him to call? "I'm not going to argue with you today," I said. "I only want to know one thing. Did you ever think I deserved to be consulted? Did you ever stop to imagine how it feels to have your life repackaged while you watch?" My voice was soft, but the people at the next table turned to listen. Mothers there must have understood the tremor in it. Betrayal strikes a communal chord. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said something that surprised me. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize you had, there were accounts. We thought it was only the house." I had been careful with that. I had kept some things private out of pride, out of habit, out of fear that knowledge would lead to predation. But I had wanted him to understand why he couldn't just walk in and take. So I let him see a sliver of the truth, not the whole vault, but enough. "I have managed," I said. "I have managed for years. I won't be managed now." He bowed his head. "Rebecca's been pushing. She says we can fix the mortgage. She says we can invest." He stopped then, his voice thin. "She says a lot of things." "She says a lot because she thinks everything is for sale," I said, and the words tasted like acid. "You married a woman who thinks your mother is an obstacle." David flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Don't say that about Rebecca." I almost laughed at his defense. He would defend her with the same ferocity he once used to defend his favorite baseball glove. Love blinds, loyalty muffles sense. But behind his loyal armor, I saw confusion tugging like a loose thread. The seed Arthur and Priya and I had planted was taking root. That night, I sat up late listening to the sounds of the home, the soft shuffling, the distant television, the sound of a nurse checking a chart. My recorder, tucked in the cardigan by the armchair, held snippets: Rebecca's voice at the florist, Rebecca's laugh on a voicemail where she said, "We'll get it all, don't worry." Each small capture felt like a small victory. When I played them back, my chest felt lighter, as if evidence could lift the weight of betrayal. But the villains grow bolder when they feel threatened. They had the advantage of time and proximity. They could move quickly, and they did. One morning, just as I was about to meet Helen at the grocery to exchange a payphone signal we'd arranged, my cell vibrated with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some small part of me, the part primed for danger, answered. A voice that was not David's and not Rebecca's said in a whisper, "They've scheduled the closing for next Tuesday. The realtor says it's all ready. If you want to stop it, you'll need something stronger than papers." My heart lurched. My mouth went dry. "Who is this?" I asked, the question stupid in its urgency. A click. The line went dead. The silence on the other end felt like a hand closing around my throat. My first thought was that the call was a trick. My second was darker. How did the caller know? Who was watching me? Had someone in my small circle turned? Had the realtor been bought? Had the bank clerk been bribed? The sense of being encircled pressed down on me like wet wool. I called Arthur immediately. His voice on the line steadied me. "We'll issue a temporary injunction," he said. "We'll notify the escrow. We'll put a stop on any closing. But you must come to the office. We need to sign emergency affidavits, and Priya must file the accounting report. If they are moving to close next Tuesday, we have only a few days to block them." Days ago we had been moving slowly and carefully, like a chess player setting up a finish. Now the board had shifted, and their move was aggressive. They had pushed a pawn into play I hadn't expected. It meant they were scared, or desperate, or both. I felt the old fear reappear, fear of losing everything at once. But fear was a tool I knew how to use. It focused me. That afternoon, while the nursing home hummed around me, I began to prepare. I wrote down the names of everyone who could help at a moment's notice. Helen would pick up the keys and make a quick check of the house. Priya would prepare a financial affidavit showing the traces of theft. Arthur would file the injunction before the bank could release funds. As evening fell, I sat by the window and looked at the small patch of sky visible over the roofline. Stars were beginning to prick through, indifferent and distant. I felt small and enormous all at once, small because of the frailty in my joints, enormous because I had a list and a plan and a will that would not be broken. I had been pushed into a place for the forgotten, and I was proving the world wrong by remembering I could fight. The phone buzzed again. This time it displayed a number I recognized. Helen. "Get to the house now," she said without hello. "There's a man there with a clipboard and a worried look. He's from the title company. He says there's a courier with documents for closing." My heart hammered. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I can hear a vehicle pulling up. They're moving fast." I swallowed, every muscle taut. The injunction had to be filed. We had hours, not days. I reached for my cardigan where my little recorder lay, folding it into my hand like a talisman. I thought of Henry's face on the mantel, the oak tree swaying where his ashes had been laid, the garden that had once been my solace. I thought of the boy I carried on my hip and how the man who sat in my son's body had chosen to be someone else. I picked up the phone and dialed Arthur. "They're trying to close," I said. "They're at the house now." Arthur's voice dropped low and fierce. "Hold on. I'm on my way. Don't go to the house. Helen, stay put and don't let anyone in without my approval." "Tell me what to do," I said, though my hands were already reaching for the keys I knew Helen had hidden under the geranium pot. Arthur was silent for a beat, and then the line clicked. The world narrowed to the sound of my breath and the urgent rustle of wheels outside the window. I opened the old drawer where Henry had kept his tools and took out a small flashlight. I tucked my legal pad under my arm and slipped out the door before Mabel could wake. The night air hit me with a cold slap. My knees reminded me they were not what they used to be, but my mind was clear. The house was a short walk away, and Helen's car was already there, lights on, engine idling. I climbed in, her eyes steady and bright in the glow of dashboard light. "They're trying to rush it," she said. "They think if they move fast they'll catch us off guard." "We won't be off guard," I said. "Not tonight." We drove fast enough to raise worried glances, but slow enough not to attract attention. The streetlights slapped the road into a path of gold. My heart pounded a steady tattoo of fear and furious determination. If they thought they could treat me like trash, they had another thing coming. I had moved from grief to action, and the next moments would decide everything. We pulled up at the curb and saw the headlights of a courier van. A man in a suit stood with a clipboard. Helen jabbed the car into park and fumbled for the spare key. The front door to my house stood open, a small rectangle of light spilling onto the porch, and inside, silhouettes moved. Helen's hand shook as she handed me the key. I gripped it like a lifeline. The door swung wide, and the smell of my home, old wood, lemon oil, Henry's pipe tobacco in the corners, hit me like a blessing and a challenge both. We stepped inside, and in the hallway, a shadow moved toward us. It was a man I didn't know. He wore a suit that cost more than my first car and the expression of someone who expected no resistance. Behind him, a woman's laugh, familiar, cold, floated from the living room. "Rebecca." She looked at me, smiling, the smile sharp as broken glass. "Oh, Eleanor. Fancy seeing you here," she cooed. My hands went cold. Everything I had worked for, everything I had loved, was within arm's reach of people who had already decided I was finished. And at the very moment they thought they had me cornered, my phone buzzed in my pocket with a message that made my blood run like ice. "We have emergency filing. Your injunction is recorded. Don't let them touch anything. Wait for the sheriff. He's on his way." Rebecca's laughter clanged through my house like a bell that announced only cruelty. She was standing near the fireplace, my fireplace, where Henry's photo still sat in its frame. Her manicured fingers traced the mantel as though she owned it. David was beside her, stiff in his suit, his jaw clenched. When his eyes found mine, they flickered with something I had seen in him as a child when he was caught in a lie, guilt mixed with defiance. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp. I straightened my back, though my knees screamed. "This is my home. The better question is, what are you doing here?" Rebecca's lips curled. "We're finalizing things. The buyers are ready. We were just smoothing the paperwork." "Finalizing," I repeated. I walked further into the room, my cardigan brushing the arm of the chair Henry used to sit in. "Without my consent? Without even telling me?" David took a step forward. "You signed power of attorney, Mom. Don't you remember? We discussed it months ago. You agreed it would be easier." The lie hit me like a slap. My hands trembled, not from fear but from fury. "I signed nothing," I said, my voice firm. Rebecca's smile turned brittle. "You must be confused. It happens." She thought she could gaslight me into silence, into believing I was feeble and forgetful. But I was not confused. I was not weak. "You forged it," I said clearly, every syllable slicing the air. "And you will answer for it." The courier, standing awkwardly with his clipboard, shifted uncomfortably. "I was told all parties were informed." I turned to him. "You've been lied to, young man. The documents are fraudulent. An injunction has already been filed." The man froze. His eyes darted between Rebecca and David. "Injunction." Right on cue, a knock thundered at the front door. Helen opened it quickly, revealing two uniformed deputies. Their presence filled the house with a new kind of silence, the kind that follows when predators realize they've been caught. Rebecca's painted smile faltered. David's face drained of color. "Ma'am," one deputy said respectfully to me, "we have court orders to halt any sale or transfer of this property until further review. Do you want these individuals escorted out?" The question gave me a power I hadn't felt in years. I inhaled deeply, letting the smell of my home fortify me. "Not yet," I said. "I want to hear them admit what they tried to do. Right here. In front of me." Rebecca hissed under her breath, turning to David. "Say nothing." But David's shoulders slumped. He looked at me, eyes glistening, and for a split second I saw my little boy, the boy who used to bring me dandelions and say they were flowers. Then the vision vanished, replaced by the man standing in my living room with forged papers in his pocket. "I didn't want it to go this far," he whispered. Rebecca said. "Don't you dare blame me," she snapped, her mask cracking. "You wanted the money as much as I did. You told me yourself you were tired of waiting for your inheritance. You said she was holding it all hostage." Gasps rippled from Helen and the deputies. Even the courier's mouth dropped open. I felt something shift inside me, a tide turning. "Hostage," I repeated slowly. "You think my life is your hostage? That everything your father and I worked for is just waiting for you to snatch?" David dropped his gaze. Rebecca, however, doubled down, her voice shrill. "You're old. You don't need this house. You don't need the money. You should be grateful we're taking care of things for you. Otherwise, you'd rot away in that nursing home." Her words seared through me. But instead of breaking me, they solidified my resolve. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out my recorder. I pressed play, and the room filled with Rebecca's own voice, dripping with greed. "We'll get it all, don't worry." The deputies straightened. Helen's eyes widened. David buried his face in his hands. Rebecca's face blanched. That could be anyone's voice. I smiled coldly. "And this?" I played another clip, her voicemail to David. "Speed things along. The sooner she's out of the picture, the better." Her bravado shattered. She stumbled back against the mantel, nearly knocking over Henry's photograph. One deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges?" I looked at Rebecca, then at David. My heart twisted, because no matter how cruel he'd been, he was still my son. But I thought of Mabel in the nursing home, abandoned. I thought of the other residents who had no voice, no proof, no allies. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't waver. "For forgery, fraud, and elder abuse." Rebecca shrieked. "This isn't fair. She's manipulating everyone." But the deputies moved quickly, cuffing her wrists as she struggled. David stood frozen, tears sliding down his cheeks, whispering, "I never meant for it to end this way." I turned my back on him. For the first time in my life, I felt no need to console him, no urge to forgive. He had thrown me away like trash, and now he was standing in the wreckage of his own choices. As Rebecca was led out, she spat over her shoulder, "You'll regret this, old woman." But her voice was drowned by the sound of the deputy's radio crackling and Helen's steady hand squeezing mine. I stayed in the living room as the house settled back into silence. The walls, the furniture, Henry's photo, they were mine again. For the first time in weeks, I felt like Eleanor Anderson, mistress of her home, not a discarded burden. Yet even in victory, a hollow ache lingered. My son's betrayal was still a wound, raw and unhealed. And I knew the hardest part was yet to come, deciding whether I could ever face him again, or whether I had to cut him out forever. The night stretched on, heavy with questions. And as I sat in my chair, recorder still in hand, I realized I had power again. But power comes with choices, and those choices would define the rest of my life. The morning after the deputies escorted Rebecca out of my home, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea cradled between my palms. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, falling across the worn wood that had carried thousands of meals, conversations, and laughter over the years. Henry and I had chosen this table together. I could still see his hand brushing over the grain, saying, "Solid oak, Ellie. This table will outlast us." He was right. It had. But what hadn't outlasted was the family we dreamed of raising in this house. My son had traded love for greed, respect for betrayal. And no matter how hard I tried to steady my hands around the cup, the tremor returned when I thought about it. Helen joined me not long after. She had stayed overnight on the couch, insisting I shouldn't be alone after what had happened. She poured herself coffee, sat down across from me, and studied my face with eyes that seemed to read every fracture in my heart. "You did the right thing, Eleanor," she said gently. "Then why," I whispered, "does it hurt so much?" Helen reached across the table, her fingers warm around mine. "Because you're a mother. Mothers don't stop loving, even when their children fail them. But loving doesn't mean letting them destroy you." Her words burrowed deep. I nodded slowly, wiping at the tears that threatened to spill. By noon, the news was everywhere. Local papers, community bulletins, even a segment on the evening news. Wealthy couple charged with elder fraud and forgery, son and daughter-in-law accused of exploiting aging parent. Rebecca's smug face was now plastered on every headline, but this time, not as the polished woman she always pretended to be. The photos showed her scowling as she was led into the courthouse, wrists bound, eyes wild. David wasn't arrested that day. He had been clever enough to let Rebecca do most of the paperwork. But the investigation wasn't over. Arthur assured me there would be consequences for him too. A week later he called, his voice tight with fury. "How could you do this to me, Mom? To your own son?" I steadied my breath. "How could you throw me away like garbage, David? After everything I gave up for you? You left me to rot in a place where people are forgotten. Do you even understand what that did to me?" There was silence. Then a broken whisper, "I just thought it was easier." "Easier for you," I said sharply. "Not for me. Never for me." He hung up after that, and I knew in my bones it might be the last time I ever heard his voice. Rebecca's trial came quickly. The evidence was overwhelming, the forged signatures, the recordings, the witnesses. The judge called it one of the most callous attempts at elder exploitation I have seen in my courtroom. Rebecca sobbed theatrically, tried to paint herself as a victim of circumstance, but it was useless. She was sentenced to prison, her reputation shattered. As for David, though he wasn't imprisoned, he was left with nothing. His name was tarnished, his career prospects collapsed, and his circle of friends evaporated. He called me once more, his voice thick with desperation. "Mom, I have nowhere to go. No money. No one." My heart ached hearing him like that. A part of me wanted to gather him up like I did when he was a boy, press his head to my chest, and say it would be okay. But another part of me, the part that had been shoved into a nursing home, stripped of dignity, betrayed, knew the truth. "I warned you," I said softly. "Greed destroys more than it ever gives. You chose Rebecca's schemes over your mother's love. Now you live with the consequences." He begged then, pleaded until his voice broke. But I didn't bend. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet, my tears falling freely. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. Arthur helped me finalize the sale of the house, just as I had planned. But instead of letting David touch a cent of it, I placed the money into a charitable trust for elder rights. A foundation in Henry's name. "If my son can't value the sacrifices of a parent," I told Arthur, "then maybe others will." The day the house sold, I walked through each room one last time. The walls hummed with memories, David's first steps in the living room, Henry's laughter in the kitchen, the sound of the piano drifting from the den. I touched the doorframe where Henry had once measured David's height with a pencil. My fingers trembled over the faint markings. Then I whispered a goodbye. Helen was waiting for me outside. She slipped her arm through mine as I handed over the keys. "You're free now," she said. Free. The word echoed in my chest. I moved into a small cottage on the edge of town, surrounded by wildflowers and sunlight. It was quiet, peaceful, a place that felt like healing. Mabel, my roommate from the nursing home, came to visit one afternoon, her laughter filling the kitchen as we drank tea together. "You're proof, Eleanor," she said, "that not all of us have to disappear." I smiled, though my eyes were wet. In the evenings, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a soft shawl, listening to the crickets sing. Sometimes loneliness tugged at me, but it no longer crushed me. Because I had chosen dignity over despair. And though the ache of my son's betrayal might never fade, I learned something far greater than revenge. Family isn't about blood. Family is about who stands by you when the world tries to throw you away. So if you're watching this, wondering if you're strong enough to stand up against betrayal, let me tell you, you are. Don't let anyone, not even your own children, decide your worth. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you forgive, or would you cut them out forever?